Welcome to another episode of Radical with me, Maajid Nawaz. Now, last week's episode focused on what we called on the parasitic practices of Big Pharma. And in that regard, we spoke to both a cardiologist, a UK-based cardiologist, Dr. Azim Malhotra, and we spoke to somebody that researches in detail into public health, Abir Balan, who, incidentally, by the way, because of her views, has been banned from Twitter. We were very happy to be able to provide her with a platform on this show to air her views instead. And that episode, of course, is up for all of you to review. But it was, in effect, a critique of the global pharmaceutical industry as we find it. But we don't only want to point fingers at industries we believe are in desperate and urgent need for reform, as Big Pharma is, but we also want to demonstrate through the course of these conversations on Radical that there are ways forward as well, that there are alternatives for everyday citizens, but also for medical professionals to seek advice from. Now, we happen to be in a phase when it comes to our own awareness around precisely what happened during the COVID period. We happen to be in a phase of increasing awareness that everything we were told was either wrong or deliberately wrong, in other words, deception. Now, that applies not just to lockdown, and in particular with lockdown because of former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak's own intervention, admitting that a policy that he was heavily involved in as one of the three top posts in government, Chancellor, Foreign Secretary and Prime Minister, you don't get pretty much higher than that. So Rishi was Chancellor. But he admitted that the policy that he pursued as one of the top three posts in government was absolutely incorrect and wrong based on incomplete information. And of course, that was Rishi Sunak's intervention challenging the wisdom around lockdowns. But whether it's on lockdowns or on vaccine mandates, in other words, coerced injection, no jab, no job, or any of a number of other policies, such as mask mandates that were introduced during the COVID period, our faith around what we were told is rapidly falling apart. That's something which all of us are beginning to witness. It doesn't need much elaboration. Many of us who were challenging this from day one are, I believe, being vindicated as each day passes. And that applies to the medical profession as well. So whereas many doctors and nurses and others that work in the sector may not have raised their voice at the time and may not even have realized that they were involved in a deception, like most people were, not just doctors and nurses, but most sectors have been corrupted in pursuit of profit. But whereas they may not have realized that then, now is the time, if there ever was a time, to begin to realize for all of us to begin to realize how we've been complicit in one of the biggest health deceptions of a generation and of a lifetime. And so as we realize this, and as the truth begins to come out, and as those that were primarily responsible for implementing this deception over us are themselves admitting that it was wrong, such as Rishi Sunak, doctors and others in the medical profession will face a choice. Do they continue to trust the institutions and the authorities and the organizations that so misled them and then via them the public? Or what do they do? And in that situation, of course, now's the time for those in the medical profession, in the health sector, for doctors and nurses and others to start looking for alternative sources of advice around everything related to COVID and I'd say beyond. Because if they're lying and deceiving around the COVID stuff, where else are they lying and deceiving? And so those of you who are in the medical profession, who up until now had taken everything at face value and are beginning to realize that things aren't quite what they seem, this is the opportunity. Up until now, you may have had an excuse, but now is the time to accept that we've been deceived. And in that spirit, this show and the guests on this show, and you'll hear, for example, in this conversation, hopefully with Dr. Tess Lawrie, that this show and our guests will take an equally responsible approach and embrace you and welcome you to the alternative sources of information and authorities from which you can seek that information without shunning you, blaming you, and pushing you away. This is the time for us to try and come together and all of us accept that we have been collectively deceived. So there are alternatives out there, and the World Health Council, which Dr. Tess Lawrie has been involved in as a founder, and she leads, are putting out alternative sources of medical information. They are a network of doctors that are seeking an integrative approach to medicine. In other words, a holistic approach in which the first recourse isn't pharmaceutical drugs, but is also looking at diet, nutrition, is also looking at exercise, lifestyle, is also looking at natural remedies. They're involved in, as I say, a network of medical professionals seeking to put out what they're calling a better way. And they have a conference named the Better Way Conference for the purposes of platforming a better way. So there is, and there are alternatives out there. And I can, if I may, speak on behalf of the World Health Council for a moment, and not that I'm in any way formally associated with them, though I have worked with them in the past as a host of one of the Better Way conferences. But if I can speak on their behalf for a moment, I'd say that they would welcome all of you, whether in the medical profession or beyond, who've had a change of heart and a change of mind when it comes to these mandates and some of the policies which we all played a part in implementing over society. And that their approach to you, if you were to have a change of heart and a change of mind, would not be one of blame, but be one to welcome you to their aisle in this debate and in this conversation to try and help you work with them for a better way forward. Because when the realization hits all of us, as it soon will, and increasingly these narratives are unraveling, and it's only going to increase in pace and speed. And when these realizations hit all of us, they're going to hit us so hard that we are pretty much all responsible. We're going to realize that it's a problem that has permeated every institution in society and all of society as a result. So now would be the time, as I say, for those of us who are becoming increasingly convinced of the critique levied against Big Pharma and other organizations such as the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum that we had been led to believe were acting in our interests, and have realized that they are absolutely not, but rather they are acting against our interests. As we realize all of this, now would be the time for us to embrace those voices and those organizations such as the World Health Council and their Better Way Conference, embrace their efforts and try and reach out to them, work with them. And as I say, they won't seek to blame, if I can speak on their behalf. They will seek to welcome those who have a change of heart. And on this note, let's go to talk Dr. Tess Lawrie. Dr. Tess Lawrie, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much for inviting me, Maajid. It's great.
I've been wanting to speak to you for a while, and I'm very happy we finally got the opportunity. This is one of those conversations where we're going to focus on you, your story, who you are, what brings you to this conversation, what is it that you're seeking to do, and how did you end up in this position where you've become a prominent medical spokesperson for a lot of the critique around what's wrong with the health sector, the pharmaceutical industry, and the way forward. So let's begin, if you allow us, with your story. Who is Dr. Tess Lawrie, and what brings you to this conversation?
Well, I'm a medical doctor. I was specializing in obstetrics and gynecology, but I lost my baby, and so I never finished that specialty. I ended up doing a PhD and getting into research and evidence synthesis. I'm a mother of three, I'm originally from South Africa, so I did all my training in South Africa. So I have, not actually all, I did some in the UK. So I have quite a broad clinical experience based on practicing medicine in Africa and African countries. I did my elective in Malawi in the 80s, and I graduated in 1990 with my medical degree, my PhD in 1999, and set up. We immigrated to the UK in 2009, and I set up a company called the Evidence-Based Medicine Consultancy Limited. So through that company, we have done, we do evidence synthesis, so which is basically evaluating bodies of evidence to support clinical practice recommendations and guidelines. I've never worked for a pharmaceutical company, and we only ever take on work that for non-profit organizations. I've done a substantial amount of work over the last 10 years for the World Health Organization, where either the company's been employed or I've been employed in an independent capacity as an external consultant. So a lot of the work, particularly the recent work around antenatal care and intrapartum care, I've been involved with at the World Health Organization.
They can't be too happy with you these days, the World Health Organization.
Well, I don't know, because it's a very big place, and there's many. The teams that I've worked with, they are really lovely and committed to, improving global health. So I don't know what's happened, but obviously there are different teams and there's different agendas, and certainly right now, what's really become apparent is that the WHO has been compromised by its private partnerships. It has a huge amount of funding from Bill Gates, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Gavi, which is the Vaccine Alliance. And so its agenda is very much driven by these pharmaceutical linked. Also they get lots of funding from big pharma, but so it's very influenced by its funders, shall we say?
Indeed, the second largest donor to the World Health Organization is the private Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and that's considering what the World Health Organization is. To have a private foundation being a second largest donor does raise very serious questions around conflicts of interest, some of which we explored in a previous episode. And you mentioned your PhD. Was that here in the United Kingdom?
No, that was the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg.
And what was your thesis in?
It was on the effects of injectable contraceptives on postnatal depression.
Injectable contraceptives?
Yes, long-acting contraceptives, yeah.
And what brings you to then, because a lot of people with your medical background, your academic background, would be practicing doctors that we wouldn't necessarily ordinarily outside of the health sector, we wouldn't have heard of as members of the public, but you're quite active. And I say quite is an understatement. You're recognized as a vocal reformer within the medical sector, and you have very strong views about what's going wrong and what needs to happen for, quote unquote, a better way forward. What drives you there? How did you end up deciding not just to be what one would expect as a practicing medic, but actually also to then enter into the public health debate and be very vocal in some of your views?
I think once one knows that something is very wrong, it's affects the lives and health of millions of people around the world, one has a moral obligation to speak out. I've always been a behind-the-scenes person. You may have heard me say I work in a small office. I collaborate with colleagues remotely. I travel a couple of times a year to locations for meetings and to present evidence and that sort of thing. But I've always been behind the scenes and not very vocal at all. And public speaking is one of the things that I'm most been most fearful of my entire life. But I looked around when I knew what I knew, which was that there was early treatment for COVID. There was treatment for COVID, effective, safe old medicines for COVID, and the authorities were withholding them. And when I knew what I knew about these COVID genetic vaccines that are totally different to other sorts of vaccines and that have never satisfactorily passed the animal studies, let alone early studies in humans, there was no way that I could be quiet if nobody else was speaking up. So really it was just, well, this is something I'm morally obliged to do.
Is that also in any way in your mind linked to the Hippocratic Oath, or was that not part of your thinking?
Well,
because I know every doctor has this kind of idea of a Hippocratic Oath and do no harm.
I would think that the principles of the Hippocratic Oath, by the time I'm at the age I am, have been so deeply integrated into who I am that I don't need to think about, I took an oath about this. So no, my intention has always been to do my very best and to help people and to make a difference while I'm on this journey in this life. And so here I have the calling. It's now, and if not me and somebody else, then who? So
when
Yeah.
Indeed. So let's take us back to the beginning of events that have led us to this conversation. You said that when you saw everything that was going wrong, in your mind, if you can summarize for us, what is to your mind, the key elements of what's gone wrong? How would you describe it? I mean, you mentioned vaccines, but that's only one aspect of it, isn't it? So how would you say, if somebody approached you, say they recognized you and in some conference or something, and they approached you and said, what is the core problem here that you're trying to address? What would you say?
The core problem is the deception. There was no evidence to support lockdowns. There was no evidence to support masks. There was no evidence to support the strategies that were rolled out at the beginning of COVID. And then there was no evidence to support the injections, and there was evidence to support early treatment. So it seems like there's been a mass deception that's gone on, that has been propagated by the authorities that we trust. And so, this needs to be revealed.
Well, and see, I agree with you. There is deception. But that, of course, in answering like that, it does then beg a second question. Why would the authorities that we trust want to deceive us so fundamentally? Which, by the way, I believe we've been deceived. And I have my answers to this, but this is a show where we're speaking to you to try and understand your views on this. What would be the gain for institutions that we trust and the authorities that up until then many people trusted? What would they have to gain to mount such a huge deception? Because a deception on this scale isn't just in the United Kingdom, but it's global.
Yes. Well, what's become apparent to me is that it's not just something of the last 2 years. Obviously, the situation of the last 2 years has made me aware that that in actual fact this deception has been going on quite a long time, with things related to the pharmaceutical industry, with things related to the financial industry and monetary systems, banks and all that sort of thing. So what's become apparent is that our governments are not controlled. They're not controlled by us. They're not serving us. They're in partnership. That's actually putting it kindly. They're in partnership with corporations. They're actually the puppets of corporations. And so what we're seeing is this corporate control of those bodies, our governments, our authorities, our regulatory agencies, our scientific journals, and even our doctors, because it all filters down through these policies. Basically, we have corporate capture of the authorities. So that is why it's we're at a place now where, when you see that, you can also see that this is a great opportunity for change, because everybody, many people in the UK are realizing that yes, if we've been lied to about this and we've been lied to about that, what else have we been lied to? And so it's this great opportunity for everybody to actually reflect and take responsibility for their own choices and to stop outsourcing them to these corrupt authorities.
Now, see, I am hearing this language, and for me, it's music to my ears, because it's everything I believe, and I've been shouting about as well. I believe our authorities are being captured. They've been captured by global multinational corporates, and it's not just the health sector, the media, the sector that I'm clearly currently working in, the health sector, of course, but also external contracting, defense contracts, the motives behind certain wars involving the military-industrial complex. All of these are now, our concerns about all of these has come to the fore because of COVID, but they've always been there. And I sometimes describe it as the curtain having been pulled back, a bit like in the final scene of The Wizard of Oz, where you see the illusions have finally, evaporated, and you can see the actual mechanics of what's going on behind the scenes. And this is a very interesting moment. I think you'd agree that for the first time, so many people are beginning to see those mechanics. The curtain has been pulled back for many people across multiple sectors. In the health sector, with the colleagues that you work with doctors, with people that you come into contact with on a day-to-day basis for your work, is there an increasing awareness of what you've just said and that I've said? Or how are doctors and nurses and others that are qualified medically responding to this very, very critical period we're in terms of the evolution of our civilization, really, I'd say?
I agree with you. Well, a year ago or 18 months ago, we started a small doctors group for doctors who were wanting to treat people who had COVID with safe old medicines, who didn't want to give the genetic injections. And this group, or these groups now, I'd say, are growing exponentially. So there's definitely a move now, and I'm sure there'll be many people out there who will feel very relieved to hear me say that, because it has felt like there's been this big block of, where the medical profession's been totally complicit in what's been happening, particularly around the COVID injections. So certainly. There's a lot of interest in how these injections work or don't work, in the emerging data, in the data that's coming out on the yellow card system and the WHO's pharmacovigilance databases. So the doctors are finally waking up, and so I think in the next few weeks and months, we're going to see a big turnaround and more of a global call to halt the COVID vaccinations and to recall all these products.
Now, it's interesting you say that. Clearly, you've had your share of people challenging you, ridiculing you, mocking you, smearing you for being an early voice on this stuff. I've been cancelled from a show for it. But I'm agreeing with you. I think we're about to turn a corner. And it's probably, in my view, going to happen quite fast. It's already happening faster than people were probably expecting. And the whole thing is going to start to unravel because the dominoes have already been knocked down, and we're going to watch the whole thing cascade. Because I'm recalling now the intervention of the former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, who now clearly, because he wants to try and become Prime Minister, has decided that it's politically expedient to criticize the very policies he was in among the lead sort of in the steering wheel for, among the group of people that were in charge. The Chancellor isn't that far down the pecking order after the Prime Minister. I mean, I'd say probably out of all of the cabinet posts, it's the PM, the Foreign Secretary, and the Chancellor who are the three most important positions. He now comes out and says, "Oh, we were deceived. Lockdown was wrong, and we weren't given the correct information," and try to pin the blame on Sage. One thing that does demonstrate, not that he's going to win, what it does demonstrate is that it's become politically expedient to try and deny a role that they had, their own role, in some of these mandates and policies in the past. And what that indicates to me is it's very quickly going to come tumbling down. And I do wonder, in your area of work, in terms of other medical professionals, the speed at which this is going to unravel, do you feel that any of them will feel slightly worried about any of the role that they played? And I'm not talking about maybe your friends, but in particular those that were in certain positions of authority who were perhaps enforcing some of these mandates on their colleagues or putting out advice on behalf of government, innocently or not, and now they're realizing that they were deceived themselves. There must be a level of nervousness within the medical profession.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. I think we're all complicit. not just the doctors. I think we're all complicit in where we have landed today. We have over decades given away our power. So, and and it happened in the medical profession. It's happened
happened in media as well.
In the media as well. So, we've basically now we can see that we've all been corrupted one way or the other, and we've kind of gone along with it. The moral fiber of our society at every level, be it the things we watch on TV, the programming, the news, the EastEnders, all these, the nastiness. We kind of and then the things we put into our bodies, the fast foods, the addiction to smartphones and all that. We're all at a real poor state of health, and I think our doctors are too. So I think those doctors who are waking up, I think we're going to really need to forgive and
I'm glad I asked you this question, because that's something which I think that's the answer you've just given there is a way that leaves the door open for anyone who is in the medical profession that may be listening. And I know that our show has people that do listen in from the medical profession, because it's to say that, look, we know that you have been involved in this process because the government told you to be, but so has everybody else. Media are no different. I mean, I remember those press conferences where the softball questions being lobbed by journalists, lobby journalists, to the Prime Minister and to the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Science Officer and others were very, very sycophantic. And it's not just, as I say, media, it's not just the health sector, but all sectors have been, in this way, to use your word, corrupted. And your answer, I think, leaves the door open for people to realize that actually this is bigger than what did I do in this particular context. It's actually what did we as a society allow to happen, and how do we move forward from that. And on that note, you're doing some work about sort of how to move forward, what the future should look like, and you have the Better Way conference as an attempt to address that, and also the World Health Council. Can you speak to us a bit about those initiatives and what they are and how you feel they're going to help move the debate forward?
Yes. The World Council for Health is an organization that began a year ago, and it was really focused on people, on helping people make sense of what's going on and taking responsibility for their health. Because at that time, the authorities, the narrative that was coming out was really counterproductive to health. It was bad for health. And so we formed, it was a group, a steering committee with members from Canada, South Africa, Germany, Austria, and America. And we put together committees, volunteer committees from experts from all over the world. Many of the names you would recognize, you probably interviewed as well, to guide documents how to treat COVID, how to detox from the spike protein, pharmacovigilance reports that just say very clearly the issues with the COVID vaccines and how they've overstepped the safety signals, the safety mark, and why they need to be recalled. So very easy documents to understand and share. Also, a lot of documents promoting health, the importance of clean, good water, breathing exercises, meditation. We have a lot of focus on mind health because I don't know if you've noticed walking down the street these days, people are really, really depressed and miserable. Even when they're on holiday, you can sense a sort of a tension and anxiety. So that is one of our focus, really getting people's body and spirit boosting their health in that way, and helping them to step away from fear, because the government programming is all fear-based. It's I'm sure you know about the psyops and the nudging, and this behavioral techniques to get people to just acquiesce to one more injection because of this, or or to put the mask back on because of a nonsensical reason. They have an orchestrated campaign to get people to go along with things. Just on that note, I also know that the National Institute for Health Research is funding research for universities to address vaccine hesitancy, not vaccine adverse events, but vaccine hesitancy. So, these are the sorts of grants available if you want to do any research at a university. So really we aimed at putting the individual first, and then giving them the strength to step away from fear and imagine a better future, because this one certainly, this dystopian plan that the World Economic Forum has for us is not everybody's cup of tea, shall we say. Some of us aim a little bit higher, and we would like a better way of living. That's not with digital passports and surveillance and injections endlessly. So we had the conference in May, and we had 7 questions, and each of the questions were, it was solutions focused. So it was, how do we reclaim science? How do we restore journalistic independence and integrity? How do we address the environmental challenges? And anyway, I won't go into the different questions. You can access them at the conference website, betterwayconference.org. It's still up there, and you can watch those videos. But out of that conference, which was attended by the most wonderful people, experts and in their field from around the world, out of the conference came how do we want to live then? What is a better way forward? And we drew up a list of 7 principles, really very simple, and drawn from our legal panel and our health panels and so on. And, the first principle is we act in honor and we do no harm. And this is from natural law, and it's just, I think when one goes back to where we come from as, and remembering who we are as human beings, when we all actually used to act, I'm sure, in honor and do no harm and just live, in a peaceful way without slandering others and saying hurtful things and doing things to ourselves that are no good. That seems to really solve so many of the world's problems. Not just doctors who need to do no harm. If we all take responsibility and we take doing no harm as a part of our ethos, then secondly, we are free. We've forgotten that we are free. Well, we are free, and we are free to make our own choices. Take responsibility for ourselves, for our choices. If you choose to do something, it's your responsibility. You can't blame somebody else or sue them or whatever. So you for your choice, your health, and your life. We are spiritual. We can deny it, but spiritualities have been a part of our existence for so long, and this is one of the key principles. We are spiritual. We thrive with living consciously and with a higher purpose, meaning in life. And we've been conned into thinking, well, if I do up my kitchen, I'll feel better, or I don't need to be spiritual, I just need to get a dog, or we've been conned into a material point of view, and it's become apparent that spirituality, whatever it is, is important to us as human beings. We thrive together. Sorry, I'm just going through them. You can stop me at any
Please
point.
do.
But,
No, please do.
So we thrive together, and the way that the powers that control us want us to, the way they operate is to divide us. So they divide, and you can see it with all these campaigns that are funded by these billionaires. The woke, the gender, all of these things divide society into smaller and smaller groups, and so you can keep this conflict going. And we need to just acknowledge that actually we thrive together. We're a diverse bunch. We're different, and together is the way that we get along best. And following on from that, then, we value different perspectives. Society doesn't work when we all believe the same thing and we all do the same thing. We actually need differences of opinion, and that's how we make our way. How we develop knowledge and wisdom. And then technology. Technology is important. Yes, we need it. But should it be should it be running us? Or should we be running, technology must be used with reverence to life and the planet. It shouldn't be the way that we shape our evolution. I feel
I think of some of the remarks by Yuval Noah Harari on that topic when you mentioned technology, because he appears to have the opposite philosophy, and that is to completely surrender to the advance of technology, including surrender what it means to be human. Is that the kind of thing you had in mind when you put that point in there?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought him up, actually, because he really is, a symbol of this dystopian view held by the World Economic Forum, which is, as you know, the famous, you'll have nothing and be happy. Well, it's also, you're a hackable animal, you're a commodity, your data is the most valuable thing, and they have all the means to extract it from you. All they have to do is to persuade you to say yes. And they've been doing a really good job, if you have to step back and see. They've almost got us acquiescing to everything. They can, but not quite. We've seen the game. So, if people could just listen to that man speak and ask themselves, is this what I want? Do I want a world run by corporate greed, run by corporations who see me nothing more than a caged, hackable animal that has to prove its use? And once it's no longer useful, well, all the useless ones, he says, will just have to be on drugs and play video games. So they have a plan for all the useless ones. And how dystopian is that? A huge swathe of the population, a limited swathe of the population, because most of the jobs would be replaced by AI. You just have to go into the supermarket these days to see that they're really moving away from having real people at the tills. It's do it yourself, or otherwise, AI will do it for you. And so if you don't cut the grade and go along with the passport, the chips, and so on, to make your life easier, of course, and the remote alerts, into your house now, get into your house now. There's some sort of danger. Then you're classified as useless. And they'll find some way of giving you drugs and getting you to play video games. I mean, I'm sorry. I think no thanks, Mr. Harari.
That's we're laughing, and people might think that we're joking. He's actually said that. What you're citing is a direct quote from him, where he said the words "useless eaters," the words those that fall behind in this AI race, what will be left for them to do? And then he says, I can think of one solution, and that's encourage them to take drugs and play video games. Like, he's actually directly said these things. So you're not exaggerating, you're actually quoting him, and everything you've just said there about him have been direct quotes, which is the alarming thing. This isn't some caricature of a person. If one were to look at his speeches, going under the skin, as he says, for monitoring the data. When you say all they want is your data, he spells that out. He wants chips under the skin to read the data, the biological data, as we go about our day-to-day practice. What is it that large corporations, those that it appears of the sorts that he wants to serve, those large multinationals, what do they gain by having all of our data? Just talk us through what the connection is between acquiring data and the motive of a large corporation. What do they want to do with this data, in your view?
Well, corporations are amoral entities. Their objective is to make money, and one could leave it at that and say, well, it's just a trading of the data. The data they can then market to you, whatever, if they know that you do this and you do that, they can. But also they can use it to inform their AI models, so that ultimately, one would be redundant as a human being. But there's an ideology that's come that you can see listening to Harari. There's an ideology that comes with this. It's a godless ideology. It's a spiritless ideology. So it's an ideology that does not see any spirituality in humanity. It sees us just as animals, as cattle, to be exploited. And so I actually read a term in a book by Fergus O'Connor Greenwood called 180 Degrees, Unlearn All the Lies You've Been Told. And it was an acronym for they. Now, conspiracy theorists are always accused of, they'll be asked, well, who are these they that you keep talking about? They want to do this and they want to do that. And I've also had that question, when one's thinking, who are these people who are then controlling the corporations and who have this great plan, dystopian plan? And Fergus says they, They, are the hierarchy exploiting you.
That's a nice acronym.
So the hierarchy exploiting you.
They.
And I think that that's very apt. And so there's this hierarchy that has actually been exploiting us for a very long time. And, it might go back hundreds of years, to be honest, because there's always been this idea of, by a small group of people, wanting to control the whole of Europe and so on. So now we're in a situation where there's a small group of people wanting to control the world. And so it's beyond profit, because you could say, well, if they, for example, if all these injections do cause extreme harm, and then if they're, if they are wanting to reduce the population, as has been suggested, then if they're wanting to make money, then why would they want the population to be reduced? Well, I don't know, but there's an ideology that goes with this, with the they. It's not just about profit, it's about control. And what we see through the World Health Organization, which is controlled by the they or them, is that they're making a last kind of grasp at world domination through this pandemic treaty. Now, if you haven't heard about the pandemic treaty, it is far more significant than Brexit. which is probably why you haven't heard about it, because if you did hear about it, you would really feel very strongly that it must not be signed by our government. And this World Health Organization pandemic treaty, now they're talking about calling it an accord or an instrument, but it is a legally binding document that would, in the next pandemic or potential pandemic, it doesn't even have to be an actual one, the World Health Organization's constitution would supersede country governments' constitutions. And so in the event of another pandemic, our sovereignty and the sovereignty of countries around the world, if this treaty goes through, would then be ceded to the World Health Organization, who would then implement this one health policy, one health or one size fits all. We're all the same, just hackable animals at the end of the day. And so they would then say, okay, this is the injection list you need. This is who gets put into an internment camp or a quarantine camp or whatever they call it. These are the terms of living. Really, they want to expand their influence, not just about health, but social situation as well. So it would literally mean that they would decide on mandates, on lockdowns, or lockups. We really need to change the terms of these words. Quarantine camps are not quarantine camps; they are concentration camps. They are internment camps. So. And lockdowns or lockups, in my view, locking people up.
I'd go so far as to say, Tess, that vaccine mandates are coerced injections.
Yes, they are. And no one can have given informed consent to these injections because they didn't have all the information. You can only be informed if you have the information. And many people didn't even get a few words said to them. They're just in a queue, and the next thing they're the next one up, and they get the injection without even receiving any. I think Dr. David Cartlin said that it was just like that for him. So, so there's this kind of, it's like a last gameplay. The way that I see it now, I think it's all coming out. It's all being revealed. And they're making a last play to kind of lock the cage door before we all escape.
Do you think we will escape?
Well, we're all different, aren't we? So the cage door is open. And that's what I want people to know and realize. That cage door is open, and it's your choice to walk out that door. But not everybody will do that. Many people will choose to the oblivion, I guess, because it's very frightening what is going on.
Is this perhaps the first time the cage door, to use your term there, has been so widely left open? I mean, there is even if people haven't yet fully, let's say, taken control of their own destiny, it's the first time that there is such a wide path available and such a clear way through, because to be very gentle, the mistakes of the COVID policy, and they weren't mistakes actually, they were deliberate, as you said, deceptive policies that had a specific aim, but they are so glaring and are increasingly becoming so glaringly obvious that the opportunity is here for people like us to reach an audience that typically may not have wanted to believe that they are in a gilded cage. And the opportunity is for people that perhaps have been in this gilded cage to realize for the first time, more so than ever, that they are, and that there is a way out of it as well.
Yeah, I think certainly it is the first time. And I think it is because everything is kind of being revealed at the same time. There's so many reveals. If you are open to seeing, there is so much. There's the financial system, which is about to collapse. There's the health sector, as we've been discussing. There's this geoengineering with the weather, which people will say, oh, well, that's a conspiracy theory. Well, look for yourself. Many things, and in fact, even the term conspiracy theory was invented by the CIA to stop people questioning the state narrative. And so
that was specifically sorry to interrupt
Yes.
you there. That was specifically to stop them questioning the assassination of JFK, the president. And recently it's come out, including in the Times, that the CIA is the most likely suspect in that assassination. What's also come out, to continue your theme there about so many things coming out at the same time, is that even if people just want to go to something as familiar as Netflix, they can find a documentary, Who Killed Malcolm X? And they can see that even the assassination of that leader, again in the same period as JFK, was a setup by state agents, and the people convicted for the killing were and have been found entirely innocent, and that the killing itself was a setup by state agents with the involvement of the federal authorities and some individual New York police officers who allowed and facilitated for his killing. And all of this is coming out, as you stated, all of it is coming out at the same time. All of these haloed narratives are collapsing at the same time, a bit like that House of Cards collapsing in Kevin Spacey's face on his own show.
Yes, yeah. So I think everything is collapsing. And I do want to say it's not a gilded cage. That cage, I think we've been led to believe is gilded. I think it's one of the deceptions. When you really look at it, it's an ugly steel cage with a big padlock on it. So do get out the cage before that padlock goes on there, and then help to co-create something that's very beautiful and that works and that doesn't trap us all in debt and whatnot, because that is the cage, isn't it? It's this debt and the fear of money all the time. And well, if the financial system is a thing of the past, really, as we know it, it's a fine time to really think about, well, what sort of world do I want to live in? And what do I need to do to prepare? Because obviously, if the old system is crashing down, and the powers that be are trying to sort of grab as much as they can while they can, it's likely there might be some chaos for a period. And so instead of being fearful, empower yourself and think, well, what do I need to do to prepare for a period of chaos, with the retaining the image of the world you want to live in and building that at the same time. And so, I would suggest to people that now would be a good time to make sure that you have some stores of clean water, some food, healthy food, some warm clothing and bedding and all that stuff, because with the energy prices, inflation, all of that going up, we don't know where that's going. So whilst keeping the vision of the world we want, where we're connected, we communicate freely, we're free to travel, to speak, and to gather, and reject that dystopian thing that they have in mind. We probably going to go through a bit of a rocky period, and it would be good to just think about what you might need for all eventualities.
Now, some people hear that and will be thinking immediately, we're going to go through a rocky period? Have we not just been through one? So you think it's going to continue to get worse before it gets better?
Yes, I do. I think we're in for a little bit of chaos probably, because and also to bear in mind that when you're trying to have global domination as these World Economic Forum and these dystopian groups are wanting. Destabilizing a country, destabilizing a situation works in their favor, so they're the fact that our government in the UK is, in a state of confusion and I mean, I'm not even sure if we currently have what the state of the government is, but for these sort of situations, they serve, the uncertainty serves the agenda of those that are wanting to control the world. So I would say that we are going to be in a state of chaos. Not that I have a crystal ball, but I would say that there is going to be a transition. We're in a transition phase from the old to the new, an old paradigm. The old paradigm of the sort of merchant rule, this corporate rule, is ending, and we need to consciously think and create what it is we want, and this is the door that's open. The door is open. We can do what is best for humanity at this point.
Many people hearing you have not gone through these sorts of experiences or have even been able to imagine them, because their entire lives they've lived in a society that has functioned as is and hasn't broken down. But your background being from South Africa, does that help you with a level of clarity about the fact that this does happen, can happen? And you mentioned some of the preparation that should be made, how to get through it. You've probably seen a society go through one of those kind of core fundamental transformations, which you're now saying is going to happen globally. Do you think that prepares you in a different way?
Well, I certainly think coming from South Africa and living in South Africa, one is aware of corruption and propaganda, perhaps more so than most. So one has less of a trust, I suppose, in self-appointed authorities, and so I would say that it does have a bearing on where I see things going.
Earlier on, you mentioned that you believe that even on holiday, people are appearing incredibly mentally strained and anxious, emotionally strained as well. Do you think it's, and I think you're touching on something here that most people will feel because day-to-day living is becoming increasingly harder. And then once you add on to that, not just the stress of making ends meet financially, but the stress of the physical ailments that have been accruing in our population. And I take a layman's view on this, but I would probably dare to say that I've noticed in my own lifetime, those physical ailments in particular have been accumulating. Over my own lifetime, I've seen the increase in allergies that never used to be there. As a child, I'd never heard of somebody dying eating a peanut. It wasn't actually something that was known at all. And now it's gone to the point where certain airlines won't even serve peanuts in case there's some form of peanut pore that floats in the air we breathe and somebody else has an allergy and breathes it in and then gets affected negatively by that. They won't even serve peanuts in the first place. And so I think it's fair to say, just from an external observation perspective, I've certainly seen a severe increase in physical ailments that never used to exist that are now accepted as normal. Which allergies do you have? You go to a restaurant, any allergies I should be aware of? Now, is it that our awareness of this is increasing? Or in your view, as you've hinted at earlier, is there some extra strain on us as a human population that has led to us becoming collectively unwell, both emotionally, physically, and mentally?
Yes, well, we've totally separated ourselves from nature, and that was the seventh principle of the better way is recognizing that we're part of nature, and we cannot live in this separate way any longer. And so there are many factors as to why we've become so unhealthy. partly because we've just become consumers and we believe everything we're told. So if we're told, McDonald's is healthy, we'll have them for breakfast, or convenient, or whatever the factors are. We've also taken on board a whole pile of new technologies, like mobile phones and that sort of thing, without any testing. So there's no, our children basically are the guinea pigs of the mobile phone generation, and they don't seem to be any happier for it, I have to say. You don't see children. I was recently away for a couple of days, and where you would have expected to see a whole lot of children gathering at the seaside, sort of, kicking a ball together, they weren't. There were a few just sitting on a bench on their cell phones, and even on hikes and things around, their focus is more on taking a picture or doing a video or something than actually experiencing nature. So there's that. There's the way that we've handed our health to the pharmaceutical industry, which is so funny, really, a funny sad way, because the pharmaceutical industry is a profit-making industry. They want people to be sick so they can peddle their drugs and make enough money. So their aim is not to get you well. If they did what they were supposed to do, if they got everyone well, they'd be out of business. So they are not the people or the organizations or the companies who should be looking after your health. You are the one who should be taking responsibility for your health. And the way we all seem to think we can do whatever we like. We can put whatever junk into our bodies. We can sit on the sofa and watch TV programming, over our weekends, and we kind of just accept that we're going to get sick, old, and die. It's called, we're just going to get sick, old, and die, and nothing we can do about it. Well, there's a lot we can do about it. We can actually just take responsibility for our health, not do all those bad things, do no harm to ourselves, and actually live a long, healthy life, and not experience the deterioration, not have to be on 8 different pills from the pharmaceutical company by the time we're 50 or 60. So we've really been lazy, and when I said earlier complicit, we kind of complicit. We've done the easy thing. We haven't actually done what's best for us, what's best for our children. We've been caught up in this kind of fake reality where we can do anything we like if we can afford it. And then when we get sick, well, we'll just take some pills or something, or have an operation. If it doesn't go well, we'll sue somebody. There's just we really just have to look at ourselves and work with what we've got. And the one thing we can change, we might not be able to change anything that's happening out there, but one thing we can do is we can change ourselves and the way that we are in this world.
On that note, talk to me a bit about, because you mentioned the pharmaceutical industry and the drugs, and it's clear, and I clearly agree with you, that these organizations, the corporations, they exist for profit. What we know is that we don't need to look much further than ask the question, and anybody can search it online. We've mentioned on this program many times, who paid the largest criminal fine in history, and just a basic online search will reveal that the answer is a pharmaceutical company. Depending on how you measure it, it's either Pfizer or GlaxoSmithKline. Both pharmaceutical companies paid the largest criminal fine in history for fraud and deception were the reasons in presenting their evidence. Now, whether it's there or if you go to DC, which let's understand, it's the capital. Washington, DC is the capital of the greatest military power in history. And if you look at the groups that spend the most on lobbying on both sides of the political aisle, in other words, they spend money to influence the Republicans and the Democrats, the largest lobby group in that regard is the pharmaceutical industry. So one doesn't need to look too deep to confirm the point you just made. They're clearly not there for our interest. They're clearly there to shape legislation in history's most powerful military might, and that is the United States of America, to shape the legislation on either side of the political aisle, depending on whoever wins, and they're doing it in a dishonest way, which is why they've paid the largest criminal fine in history. Right? They are doing it using the deception and fraud that you referenced earlier. So anybody, even just listening to this 2-minute conversation from this longer interview on the question of the pharmaceutical industry, anybody who just heard this should have glaring question marks around that industry, let alone looking into it further. But that does raise another question, that when it comes to health, and you're a doctor, if it's not the medical drugs that are there to serve us, and clearly most of them don't help us, and our last episode on the parasitic practices of Big Pharma goes into that into some depth. But if it's not the pharmaceutical drugs that are there to help us, as somebody that is a medical professional, what should a sick person do in terms of early treatment? And let's speak in general terms, it could be any kind of illness. If the first port of call shouldn't be to take pharmaceutical drugs and think that they are going to fix us because they usually only address the side effects, what should a person do?
Well, I think it depends on what you're suffering from. And certainly, if one eats well, organic, nutritious food, one takes exercise, one does practices that reduce your stress levels, and one doesn't take harmful substances, including caffeine. I like a good coffee too. But so there are ways of living where you can minimize your risk of disease. It's discomfort, it's your body's way of telling you that something's not right, that there's an imbalance. So when you feel unwell, it's important to actually take stock of everything, of your life, your stresses, your diet, and say, okay, well, what is wrong? What can I improve or change? And I think if we did that, then we wouldn't get sick, because there's usually early signs to disease. There's usually early signs, and I think mostly we think we can just keep on going the way we go without making any changes, without actually growing and developing and changing. So it can be a relationship, perhaps. You might be subject to lots of terrible stress, or financial worries, or or you might break your ankle and be in a car accident. Well, that's a different, So there are all sorts of different. But in terms of the chronic illnesses, and I would suggest that everybody really takes stock of the things that make them feel good and the things that make them feel bad, and then trying to change the balance of things so that they are doing more of the things that actually inspire and motivate and enhance their well-being, and eliminate those things that just don't resonate and that are potentially harmful. On the subject, just the one thing is, there's what I've realized now, because I'm on a journey too, like everybody, and I've had to relook at a lot of the things that I've held to be true. And one of those things was preventing disease through vaccination. Now, I'm fully vaccinated, and not with the COVID vaccines, but up until then, and my children as well. And, what this involves really is injecting in case of disease. Now, we don't even know the prevalence of these diseases that we're injecting against, and yet we're doing all this preventive injecting. And given what I know now of the pharmaceutical industry and how they've deliberately deceived us over the safety of these COVID injections, I would caution against taking childhood vaccinations now, because the the pharmaceutical industry clearly is not accountable, then we don't seem to be able to hold it to account for the potential harms and injuries.
You're perfectly right to raise this, because I wonder whether in all of these other vaccines that we've been taking from childhood, I wonder whether the adverse events will dwarf the very thing we're attempting to prevent, as we now see with the COVID jab.
Yes, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And, like you, I also, when I was growing up, there was nobody with a peanut allergy, really, or maybe, and there was certainly none of these special needs, autism spectrum disorders, people in the classroom. And now that's very, very common to have special needs in the class, and also a lot of chronic diseases. So in every family, there's someone with Crohn's or asthma or something. So we need to take a step back and have independent scientists and doctors. We need to let their voices be heard, because certainly they have been trying to be heard for decades. And of course, I can see now why they have struggled to be heard and have been censored and discredited, because I've experienced that now in this past 2 years. So I would think it's really time for us to give a voice to independent doctors and scientists around the world who have been raising concerns and trying to publish papers and studies that are counter to what the pharmaceutical companies are telling us, and our health authorities who are financed by the pharmaceutical companies, and we need to be cautious. We need to have a more cautious approach, recognizing too that our doctors, the general practitioners, are basically weaned on the pharmaceutical doctrine. And so they don't know any better, so that brings me onto something else. Actually, there's a big move towards an integrative approach to medicine, a more holistic approach, using natural remedies and so on. And I would suggest to people that they explore those avenues now, rather than the allopathic route through the GP with the drug options and the drugs to treat the drug side effects and so on, and rather take responsibility for your health and explore options that are less harmful.
It's interesting when we're talking about, I agree with you on the integrative medicine approach, by the way, and I think that should be, again, from a layperson's perspective, that should be the way forward. It's something which, in communities such as the community that I come from, has always been stressed that, whether you go to like herbal medicine or you try and address some of the natural organic, for example, honey, black seed, these are very common remedies that within our communities have been passed on through generations. Unfortunately, I think part of the issues we've been raising in this conversation also apply in those communities, because modernization has affected everybody, especially post-colonialism, and a lot of those old, let's say, the kind of old knowledge or wisdom that was passed down has been deliberately ridiculed. So when you mention integrative medicine, it's because you can't patent stuff that grows naturally. Of course, you can see how it becomes in the interests of the pharmaceutical industries to deliberately ridicule, as snake oil salesmen, those that talk about natural remedies. But, and let me put it to you, I think the truth is the other way around, that the snake oil salesman label should truly be applied to Big Pharma.
Yeah, I would agree with you. We certainly have been duped.
Yeah. People are waking up to this, though, and I think that it was in the Times newspaper yesterday. It was effectively, I posted this as, I said, the Times has run a press release disguised as a news article on behalf of Big Pharma, because it was what was effectively a press release disguised as a news article reporting that the new CEO of Pfizer is worried about what he called vaccine fatigue in the new round of vaccines that they want to bring in the winter. Now, there's only the same day, this is in the Times the same newspaper on the same day, also ran another article saying there's Ukraine fatigue, which it's very interesting to me that instead of understanding that people are waking up to the propaganda, these news articles are seeking to pathologize resistance to propaganda by calling it fatigue. When the truth is, people are just increasingly becoming aware of the fact that we have been so deceived, and the pharmaceutical industry is one of the biggest culprits there when it comes to that deception. Where do people find reliable information on integrative medicine and natural remedies, though? Because this does, with the deliberate undermining of that sector, because you can't patent it, so you can't make profit from it, there has become a limited ability to find people that are reliable and authoritative, who know what they're doing when it comes to natural remedies and in integrative medicine. So where would you recommend people go?
If you search integrative medicine, there are many integrative medicine clinics and specialists around, so I think people really need to do their own research and decide who they trust. World Council for Health, we have in our Science and Medical Committee, we have doctors from various disciplines, including some homeopaths. So we have a broad range of expertise. We're also launching a website called Source, which will enable practitioners of all natural medicine as well as allopathic medicine to list themselves, and that might be helpful for people who are leaving the NHS and needing to establish a practice and be seen. So there certainly are ways, and I think it really starts with that, that empowering is getting people into that place of empowerment and recognizing that they actually have to engage, that they have to do their own research, and all of these things are in plain sight, both the good and the bad, and are there for you to make your decisions. You just might find it slightly more difficult all the propaganda will be more in your face, shall we say, than the good stuff.
All right. Well, on that note, Tess, thank you very much. It's been fascinating talking to you. If people want to get hold of you, find where you are or the information that you either put out or that you've referenced, how can they find Dr. Tess Lawrie?
I have a Substack, and I try and keep things light and positive on that, because we really do need to have a positive way of engaging at the moment and stepping away from fear. So there's a Dr. Tess Lawrie Substack. We have the World Council for Health website. The betterwayconference.org is really a great was a great conference, and those presentations are still available, and you can watch them. And also I encourage you to join our live streamed Monday meetings, which are at 7:00 UK time. They take about two hours, and they're far better than TV if you want to hear really what's going on in the world, as well as hear from doctors and scientists and lawyers who are actively engaging in co-creating a better way. So do join us.
Where are these live streams? You say Monday live streams. Where does somebody find those?
In the World Council for Health newsroom. So you just go onto World Council for Health newsroom, and then and you'll see all the back issues as well. We've had the most amazing speakers. I mean, everybody from Dr. Robert Malone, Geert van den Bosch, Robert Kennedy, and more. And also we've had we have had farmers from Australia speaking about how to create family-owned farms. World Council for Health is everything. People seem to think health is just medicine or something. Health is everything. It's the way we live, we work, we eat, and we rest. So on that website and at our live stream meetings, you'll find the sustenance and the information that you need to keep going and to create a better way and to step into your sovereignty, which is what's needed at this time.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Tess Lawrie. An absolute pleasure speaking to you.
Thanks, Maajid.
So we just heard there a long conversation around various aspects touching Dr. Tess Lawrie's work, the World Health Council, and a better way forward. But one of the things in conclusion that struck me was her ending with this call for an integrative medical approach, a more natural way, a holistic way to treat through early treatment, rather than our first resort being to go to the drug companies for pharmaceutical treatment, chemical treatment of any ailment. And Dr. Lawrie mentioned integrative medicine as a better way forward. And I'd like to say that actually, speaking as we did of where we have been deceived, and raising the question from there that where else have we been lied to if we've been lied to in this case? And of course, I'm recording here now the COVID mandate period. If we were deceived by Big Pharma and the media and the government in cahoots with regards to COVID mandates, where else have they lied? It does raise questions around the entire health sector and the systems in place and how they treat us at the moment. And that's why I think more so than any other reason, we should take very seriously this call for a reformed approach to the way we treat our health, and rather addressing it through this integrative way, as opposed to our first resort being the drugs from the pharmaceutical companies. If the issue of trust no longer exists or is significantly depleted because of our concerns around the COVID mandate period, then raising that question, where else have they lied? What else have they deceived us around? Should lead us eventually to the conclusion that Dr. Lawrie raised herself as well. And that is, we're all responsible for our own health. We need to take individual responsibility for our health, not rely on the system, not rely on the authorities to tell us what to do and to tell us how to be treated. And that way, if we do take individual responsibility, when it dawns upon us, as it has for many of you who are regular listeners to The Radical Show, but also as it will, I believe, for many others beyond this show, as it dawns upon many of us that we have been deceived through this period, there are two ways we can react. One is in shock, anger, and denial. And of course, when you look at the stages of grief, those that are shocked will go through that very angry phase and seek to blame. And of course, there are many people to blame, so many in fact, because of the way in which this is a systemic problem, that we could point to everybody, including ourselves. So that may not be the healthiest way to proceed. Another way would be to focus on that individual responsibility, to start doing something now about our own lives and healths, to try and improve how we live, to take responsibility for our lifestyles, to try and migrate incrementally at first perhaps, but eventually as fast as possible, away from a dependency on a system that is, as evidenced through the COVID period, is not there to serve us, but rather uses us to serve it and its interests, in this case being to increase profit for more control. So if we were to start now by taking more responsibility for our own health, by seeking out integrative approaches and natural remedies as a first port of call, including a holistic approach, which would also include exercise and good nutrition and good diet, but also then natural remedies. If we were to start doing that now, it would be a lot easier adopting that positive approach when it becomes mainstream that we have been incredibly deceived by the health sector and the pharmaceutical industry. It would become a lot easier for us to handle that news because we already would be taking responsibility for ourselves, and that inclination to blame others won't be as strong. Of course there are people to blame, of course there are people responsible, and of course justice must be served. But actually, in serving justice, we also need to remain rational and make sure that we're not being used as tools to serve somebody else's agenda as well. Because anger is one of the easiest things to manipulate. And one of the best ways to try and reduce anger in our own selves when learning of the facts and other pieces of information that come out through the course of conversations such as today's is if we're already taking responsibility for ourselves, we already would have put into place certain mitigators so that as more and more gets revealed, and it all will and is unraveling very quickly, we won't be as angry because we would have done certain things, as I say, to take responsibility for our own health. Those mitigating factors would be in place, and the news we receive as it unfolds will be less shocking to us, which hopefully leads to less of a stage of anger and finger pointing. Now, as I say, that's not to absolve anyone of their own duplicity, of their own responsibility, I should say, in what's happening with the COVID mandate period and beyond. But it would help, I believe, to take Dr. Lawrie's advice there and focus on improving ourselves so that, of course, that's a prerequisite, because only by improving ourselves and by looking after ourselves will we have a clearer understanding as to what needs to be done in public for everybody else. Thank you for tuning in. This is Maajid Nawaz here for The Radical Show. Until next time.